So, building off our discussions on attitudes and emotions in the workplace in the previous module, where we kind of talked about job satisfaction, we talked about organizational commitment, and then we also talked about prejudice and how it leads to discrimination. We're now going to transition to motivation in organizations and basically what we know about motivation. And when we're talking about motivation, what do we mean? What is motivation? So we're really going to be thinking about how motivation is related to job satisfaction, organizational justice, and also at the end of the day, how it's related to productivity. So let's go ahead and dive right in and take a look, as always, with our initial definition. So motivation is a set of processes that arouse, direct, and maintain human behavior towards obtaining some goal. So that's our definition. And there's a lot packed into that definition. One, a set of processes. So there's a lot of different ways that people can motivate themselves. There's a lot of different ways people can be motivated. A lot of different things motivate different people. Some people are highly motivated by their social interactions. Some people are highly motivated by the flexibility of their workplace. And some people are simply motivated by pay. And a lot of times organizations think that that is the primary motivator. The more you pay, the more you motivate people. And we'll find out that's actually not that common. Most people are actually more motivated by other factors. So that's the first thing, is it's a set of processes. There's different ways to instigate motivation in people. What you're trying to instigate is arousal. And by arousal, we simply mean the willingness to act. In other words, that someone is engaged. Someone is actually thinking about, what do I want to do? That's motivation. That's arousal. And that arousal needs to be directed. So it's not just a manic desire to do activities. It is, I'm aroused to direct my energy towards a particular goal. And finally, not only am I aroused and directing that arousal towards a target, I'm able to maintain that arousal and direction. So that's that arousal, direction, and maintenance parts of motivation. And all three are important if we're really talking about motivating someone to attain a goal. Finally, this arousal, direction, and maintenance results in actual behaviors, and those behaviors are focused at attaining a goal. So again, our components are arousal, direction, and maintenance, and they are targeted towards a goal. They result in behavior, and there's a lot of processes that can increase or decrease the likelihood. So we can have processes that target all of these. We can have processes that help someone direct their energy. We can have processes that help people gather their energy. In other words, we might think about 15-minute breaks every 2 hours. That might be a process to let people recharge for a second to increase their arousal. We can also have processes that help people maintain their energy towards longer term goals. And that's why there's a lot going on in this one definition. So let's take a look at these three components with a little more detail. So the components, again, are that arousal, a realization that there is a goal you want to accomplish. So arousal is about recognizing the goal and being engaged with that goal. So for example, the effect might be to get an A in a class. That's your arousal. You have a goal in sight and you've realized that goal. That means that you're more likely to move forward. The direction is what tasks are required to accomplish the goal. So for example, it might be coming to class regularly, reporting in a time, going to all the tests, completing all the materials, listening to the feedback. All of those are accomplishments, and all of those are tasks, and that's the direction. And the maintenance is the persistence, discipline, and determination required to complete each objective on your path to your goal. So it's not just enough to be really engaged that first week. So I'm aroused, I want an A. The first week, I attend all the classes, I listen to all the lectures, I take the quiz, I do the discussion. But that isn't enough. A class is generally 15 to 16 weeks. So you need to do those tasks for 15 to 16 weeks to actually get to the goal. And that's the maintenance, that's the persistence. So basically reviewing reports 2 times before turning them in, studying for each test. Those are all examples of maintenance behaviors. And like most of the theories that we discuss in organizational behavior, these are broad concepts of human motivation, human social interactions, and psychological concepts applied to the organizations. But you can see how these components of motivations would also work in, well, my example here was an academic setting, but you can also think about, for example, if you wanted to change something about your physique, whether you wanted to lose a little bit of weight, whether you wanted to put on a little bit of muscle. The first thing is that arousal. Are you actually interested in doing it? Are you, I want to get this done. I want to put on 5 pounds of muscle mass. Okay, then what's required to accomplish that goal? Well, that might be increasing your protein intake. That might be maybe even reducing your cardio a small amount. And that might be really focusing on kind of weightlifting in the realm that actually builds muscle mass. And again, the maintenance to put on that much muscle, even 5 pounds, takes a little bit of time. You're not going to be able to just do it once or twice. You're probably going to have to stick to those tasks for a period of time until you attain your goals. So again, to really talk about motivation, we have to be thinking about how do we make sure people are realizing a goal that they want to accomplish. And notice that important part, want to accomplish. So not just recognizing the goal, but also engaging with the goal. Then we need to provide them with the proper tasks that will help them get to that goal. And finally, we need to create the environment or the support that will allow them to continue doing those tasks until the goal is attained. And you can kind of think about how an organization, the culture itself of the organization may make this easier or harder. The type of goals that are set may make this easier or harder. And the management that is involved. So is a manager actively helping you with wanting to accomplish your goals, giving you the tools and tasks to be able to complete the goals, and giving you the time and understanding that it may take a few weeks or a few months to get to that goal. So some key points about motivation. First, motivation and job performance are not synonymous. More people that are more motivated tend to perform better. That is true. But when we actually try to find a strong direct relationship between motivation and performance, it's not always there. And when we think about it, it really comes down to, can you perform well on a task and not be motivated? So a lot of jobs, it doesn't matter if you're motivated or not. You either do the task or you no longer have the job. So how much effort you put in may not directly attach to how much performance you're doing. Motivation is also multifaceted. And what that basically means is that when we're talking about, especially in an organization, it's rarely that we only have a single task. A lot of times, for example, I have 5 broad goals that I'm supposed to be working on in my organization, and then I have 5 more personal goals that I'm supposed to be working on. And each one of those is a long-term, year-long goal. Within those goals are multiple smaller goals and smaller tasks. For each client, I have various tasks that need to be completed, all of which require some motivation on my behalf. And therefore, as we have several motives happening at once, there's often sometimes conflicting motives. So I have to make some priority decisions of what I'm going to spend my time on. Also, people are motivated by many different things: praise, challenges, meeting needs. And that's what we're going to kind of focus on next, is what kind of needs actually drives motivation. But recognize that just throwing money at people tends to not necessarily have an effect. And what we actually find when we look at specifically the relationship between pay and salary and motivation is that as you increase pay, you do see an increase in motivation up to a point. At the point the person is actually making enough money that they are comfortable, that they feel like they're getting an equitable amount of money for the work that they're putting in, pouring more money makes them happier. You see job satisfaction increases. You don't necessarily see motivation increases at that point. And the model we're going to talk about next may help to illustrate why that is. So Maslow's need hierarchy theory, I want to be very clear here. Some of the theories that we talk about, and when we talk about a theory is a set of ideas that has been supported multiple times by multiple studies. So a lot of people, when they hear the word theory, they think it's just that. It's a possibility. A theory generally means that it's been fairly well supported. But I do want to point out that needs hierarchy theory with Maslow, it's somewhat supported, especially when we apply it to organizational settings. It's a good model for us to think about, but it's not necessarily going to be perfectly predictive for every person. Mainly because the idea of a hierarchy is that you have to go through these steps. So if your psychological or your physiological needs are not being met, you don't care about anything else. If your safety needs aren't being met, you don't care about those higher needs. If your social needs are not being met, you're not going to care about your esteem needs. And if your esteem needs aren't met, you're not going to be thinking about self-actualization. But let's talk about each of these from lower order to higher order needs. So they are fairly supported, that if someone is not getting their physiological needs maintained. And physiological needs are basically, are you getting enough food and sleep? It's very basic. Is the organism that is you being given enough resources that you're not worried about lack of sleep, lack of food, lack of basic physiological needs? If those are being dealt with, and it doesn't take a whole lot. I often joked when I was in grad school that I lived off ramen noodles. There were some weeks where that was pretty close to true. The next thing we worry about is our safety needs. In other words, do we have shelter? Do we have warmth? Do we have a home that basically keeps us away from the weather when necessary? And also within the workplace, is our basic safety assured? Are we working in a very dangerous or unpleasant environment? If those needs are met, the next one is social needs. Are we actually getting the interactions with people that we want? And this is going to vary individually. Some people need more social needs, some need less, but even the most introverted person still typically needs some form of social interactions. If those social interactions are being met, the next one is self-esteem needs. Are we being praised? Are we being recognized for our accomplishments? Do we feel as if we're valued? And finally, if all of those are in place, that's when we start thinking about how do we actually become a better person? How do we focus on our own skill sets, our own thoughts, and basically try to develop as an individual? So if you are trying to do a developmental program to motivate people, in other words, you're at the self-actualization level, but your workers are barely making enough money to be able to eat, it's probably not going to have an effect. That's what this theory suggests. That when we're thinking about motivating, the first thing we have to decide is where are people at? And if they are in the physiological needs, that's what's going to motivate them. More pay to where they can afford food and sleep, or less hours, for instance. So if we think of someone that's making barely enough money to be able to even afford food and is working 80 to 90 hours a week, not getting enough sleep, what's mainly going to motivate them is a job that pays a little more and has less hours. If they have enough pay and enough hours to allow sleep and to allow food, the next thing that's going to motivate them is whether or not their environment is comfortable and safe. The safer it is, the more comfortable it is, the more motivating it's going to be. But again, up to a point. At a certain point, the person has enough food, has enough sleep, feels relatively safe. That's when we start to have to focus on the social needs. Are they actually getting that interaction? Now, I mentioned that this theory both is supported and isn't supported. Where it isn't supported is there are people that are in physiological need that still respond to social motivations. There are people that honestly are in very dangerous environments that still respond to esteem motivations. So the theory itself basically says that if you're at one of these stages, the only thing that's going to motivate you is something in that phase, that stage. If you're in the social needs phase, that's the only thing that's going to motivate you. What studies of organizational behavior have found is it really does involve on the individual. And there are some individuals that really are just concerned with pay. Those are people that are, as long as my safety needs and my physiological needs are being obtained, I don't expect work to praise me. I don't expect to make friends there, and I certainly don't expect to become a better person. Those are things I do outside of work. So again, that's where this theory, though not a bad theory, and a good way to conceptualize this information, isn't always perfectly predictive of workplace behaviors. And that also means that in the workplace, to make the theory work better, we've kind of broken it down into specifying that there are 5 human needs and that they're each are arranged in such a way that lower, more basic needs must be satisfied before higher order needs. And that's one of the problems with the theory, is that it must be attained. In general, though, we kind of break down that theory into growth needs and deficiency needs. So deficiency needs means if it's missing, you're not going to be motivated. Those are the physiological, safety, and social. So for a modern organization, these should be kind of a guaranteed, if you will. If you're creating any job, it should include physiological, safety, and social needs. You should be paying people a reasonable amount for the work they do. The amount you're paying them should allow them to be able to live their lives, at least at some level of physiological and safety concerns. And finally, they should be getting some social interaction. If you have those things, then you can start focusing on the growth needs. How you praise them, how you make them feel better, how you make them more engaged, how you motivate them with tying their work into the actual projects that the company does, and finally hoping to get people to where they're actually even developing further within that organization, not only through promotion and advancement, but also with their own skill sets and their own abilities. So again, just kind of breaking this down, the deficiency needs, these needs must be met in order for people to develop in a healthy fashion. So we have that physiological, fundamental biological drive, such as the need for food, air, water, and shelter. Safety, the need to be in a secure environment and to be free from threats or physical or psychological harm. And finally, social, the need to be social. That is, to have friends, to be loved, to be accepted by people. And you can kind of see that there's a lot of overlap to what we've already talked about as far as organizational commitment. So the free of threats of physical or psychological harm. So a lot of times we were talking about some of the negative effects of what drives down job satisfaction and what drives down organizational commitment, or the results of prejudice and discrimination. Those are examples of both physical and psychological harm. If someone's in that environment, it's going to be hard for them to be motivated by praise when they don't feel safe anymore. And that's really what we want to conceptualize when we're thinking about these things. And finally, there's the growth needs, the needs that must be met in order for a person to reach his or her full potential. So there's those esteem needs, the need to develop self-respect and to gain the approval of others. So this is involving how you actually reward good behavior, how you reward successful and high performance, and then finally self-actualization, the need to discover who we are and develop ourselves to our fullest potential. So the you can all be all that you can be. But that really comes down to, are you self-motivating? That's what self-actualization really is about, is that you're motivated by your own self-discovery. You're motivated by your own learning and your own skill development. And that's where that's where the goal of Maslow's need hierarchy is, to get people into that level. So as always, if you have any questions about these ideas after you've watched, basically listened to this lecture and gone through the book, feel free to post your questions on the discovery board or the discussion board on Canvas, and I'll talk to you in the next module.